Imagine going to sleep in a room where the walls are made entirely of transparent ice. The air temperature is -5 degrees Celsius, and your bed is carved from frozen water. Sounds like a survival challenge? But for thousands of modern travelers, this has become a unique experience offered every winter by the ice hotels of Scandinavia. These unusual hotels aren't just a tourist attraction. They're a bridge between ancient times and modernity, between the forgotten survival techniques of northern peoples and the comfort of the 21st century. Every year, when temperatures in Lapland drop below zero, craftsmen begin building entire palaces from ice that will stand for just a few months before melting in spring and returning to the river. Write in the comments where you're watching this video from and what time it is for you right now. I'm curious to know who's joined our journey into the world of ice sleeping. The story of the first ice hotel begins in 1989 in the small village of Jukkasjärvi in northern Sweden, 200 kilometers beyond the Arctic Circle. A French artist came there for an ice sculpture exhibition, but unexpectedly, all the regular hotels were fully booked. The organizers offered him to spend the night right in the exhibition hall, a huge igloo made of snow and ice. The artist agreed, laid down a reindeer skin on the ice floor, climbed into a sleeping bag, and spent the entire night there. In the morning, he said he slept surprisingly well, and this accident gave the locals an idea. What if we built a real hotel from ice? The very next winter, in 1990, the first ice hotel opened, with just a few rooms, but it was the beginning of a new tourism era. The concept proved revolutionary because it brought people back to a very ancient practice. Northern peoples, the Inuit of Greenland and Canada, the Sámi of Scandinavia, the Nenets of Siberia, had used snow and ice as building materials for temporary shelters for centuries. A traditional Inuit igloo could be built in 2 to 3 hours from snow blocks, and inside, thanks to the insulating properties of snow and human body heat, the temperature would rise to -5 and sometimes even to 0 degrees, even though outside it could be -30 or 40. The Sámi used a different technique. They dug shelters in deep snowdrifts or built temporary huts from snow when migrating with reindeer herds across the tundra. These skills were passed down from generation to generation as vital knowledge for survival in the Arctic climate. Modern ice hotels took these ancient principles and combined them with architectural art and tourist comfort. Today, several major ice hotels operate in Scandinavia. The ice hotel in Jukkasjärvi remains the most famous. The snow hotel in Finnish Kemi offers rooms right on the shores of the Gulf of Bothnia. And in Norway, there's the Sorisniva Igloo Hotel near the city of Alta. Every autumn, when temperatures consistently drop below -10 degrees, construction begins. Teams of craftsmen work for several weeks using special equipment and thousands of tons of ice and snow. They take ice from nearby rivers, clean, transparent, without air bubbles, which formed slowly in the cold Arctic water. The construction process resembles the work of a sculptor, only on a massive scale. First, a frame is created from metal or wood, onto which special artificial snow called snowflake is sprayed from a mixture of water and air. This snow has a special structure, denser and stronger than regular snow. When the main walls harden, rooms, corridors, and halls are carved out inside. Then the most amazing part begins. Artists and sculptors from around the world come to create unique ice interiors. Each year the theme changes. One year it might be fairy tale characters, another year, abstract forms, the next, copies of famous works of art, only executed in ice. When the hotel is ready, usually by mid-December, the guest season begins. And here tourists face a real challenge. How do you sleep at -5 degrees? Preparation begins long before a person ends up in their ice room. Hotel staff conducts a mandatory briefing where they explain all the nuances of the upcoming night. Guests are given a special cold survival kit, an extreme-grade sleeping bag rated for temperatures down to -30 degrees, a set of thermal underwear made from synthetic materials that wick away moisture but retain heat, thick wool socks made from sheep's wool, a hat that covers the ears, and even a special balaclava if the guest prefers to cover their face. The sleeping arrangement itself is the result of centuries of experimentation by northern peoples with cold insulation. The bed base is made from a solid block of ice, sometimes with small decorative carved elements. On this ice pedestal, a wooden frame is placed. It creates the first air gap that prevents cold from directly transferring to the body. Then comes a thick layer of reindeer skins, at least 2 to 3 layers, each skin several centimeters thick. Reindeer fur has a unique structure. The hairs inside are hollow, filled with air, making them incredibly effective insulators. That's why northern reindeer can sleep directly on snow at -40 degrees. On top of the skins is placed another layer of insulation, usually a special insulating mat used by mountaineers and polar explorers. Only after all these layers does the guest unfold their sleeping bag. These sleeping bags are true marvels of modern technology. They're filled with either high-quality goose down or the latest generation synthetic insulation that retains heat even when wet. The outer shell of the sleeping bag is made from windproof material, and inside, a soft fleece lining. Professional models have a special hood that cinches so that only a small opening for breathing remains exposed. It's in this cocoon of warmth that a person will spend the next 8 to 9 hours. But before climbing into the sleeping bag, there's a crucial ritual: warming up the body. Every ice hotel has a warm zone with a traditional Finnish sauna where temperatures reach 80 to 90 degrees. Guests spend 30 to 60 minutes there, allowing their bodies to fully warm up. After the sauna, they're offered hot drinks, herbal tea, berry juice, sometimes glögg, a traditional Scandinavian spiced drink. This temperature contrast, from +80 to -5, seems extreme, but actually, it prepares the body. A warmed body releases so much heat in the first minutes after the sauna that a person doesn't feel discomfort even in the ice room. The transition to cold must be quick. Guests literally move from the warm zone to their ice room in a minute, quickly change into thermal underwear. It's important not to allow sweating, which would later turn into cold moisture, and immediately climb into the sleeping bag. The first 30 minutes are a period of adaptation. The body activates thermoregulation mechanisms. Skin blood vessels constrict to conserve heat inside. Heart rate increases. Small muscle contractions may occur. This is a natural reaction to cold, the same one that helped our ancestors survive during the Ice Age. But after 20 to 30 minutes, when the body warms the space inside the sleeping bag, amazing comfort sets in. The physiology of sleeping in cold has its peculiarities that have been studied by polar researchers and sports medicine doctors. When a person is in a sealed, well-insulated sleeping bag at an ambient temperature of -5, their body creates a microclimate inside with a temperature of about +25 to 30 degrees. This is achieved through metabolic heat, energy that the body constantly produces simply to maintain life. An adult at rest releases about 80 to 100 watts of heat, and in the enclosed space of a sleeping bag, this heat accumulates. At the same time, the face remains exposed and breathes cold air. This is important because cold air contains more oxygen and promotes deeper sleep. Then, a quiet magic happens that many don't expect. At some point, the cold stops being the main character of the night. You lie there, hearing the muffled silence, and the air feels dry and clean, as if it's just been freeze-dried. Inside the sleeping bag, body heat gradually fills the gaps between the insulation layers, creating a small personal weather system. Calm, steady, almost homely. And it's at this moment that many first understand. Northern sleep isn't a struggle, it's a technique. Ice hotels specifically maintain around -5 degrees Celsius inside, and this isn't a whim, but a calculation. At this temperature, the ice is stable, the carvings on the walls don't melt, and the snow vaults maintain their strength like an arch in a stone temple. If you make it warmer, wet spots and micro droplets start appearing, and with them, comfort's main enemy, dampness. So the cold here acts not as punishment, but as a structural condition, and that's why the room feels strangely calm. The most important rule, which staff repeat almost in a whisper, sounds mundane. Don't overheat before sleep. The sauna is needed to warm the muscles and release tension. But afterward, you can't rush around and fuss. Otherwise, you'll sweat, and wet fabric in freezing air will quickly start stealing heat. That's exactly why thermal underwear is chosen to wick away moisture. And on top, you leave minimal layers. Let the sleeping bag do the work, not a random cabbage of clothing. This detail determines half the night. The ancient peoples of the north knew the same thing, just in different words. The Inuit, who built snow dwellings, valued not heat, but dryness and absence of wind, because wind strips away warmth faster than anything. Snow, paradoxically, insulates well. It's filled with air, and air is a poor conductor of heat. That's why a snow shelter can be warmer than an open fire in the wind, and this fact always surprises beginners, as if nature hides the clue in plain sight. The Sámi tradition of winter overnight stays also relied on layers, not fire. Reindeer skins in the nomad's daily life were what tourist mats and extreme sleeping bags are today. The boundary between body and cold. The hollow hair of the northern reindeer traps air, and because of this, the fur works like a natural thermos. When you lie down on skins in an ice hotel, you're essentially repeating the ancient survival formula. Only around you isn't tundra, but artistic carvings and soft light. This formula is well known from polar expedition documents too. Travelers at high latitudes described in detail how insulation from below is what matters. Diaries and reports contain the same thought over and over. The pull from the ground, ice or snow, is stronger than from above, and therefore the bedding is more important than a second blanket. That's why ice hotels always create multi-layered foundations: ice, wood, skins, insulator, and only then the sleeping bag. And when you understand this logic, fear begins to dissolve like steam on cold glass. The first minutes in the sleeping bag often feel too real. You sense the cold air on your face, hear your own breathing, and your brain seems to check the situation every few seconds. But then a quiet shift happens. The body warms the interior volume, and the sleeping bag fabric starts working like a valve. It retains heat, but doesn't let you stagnate. In a properly tightened hood, a small opening remains for breathing, and this creates the feeling of a safe den where frost is outside, but even calm is inside. There's another detail rarely imagined beforehand. Ice has almost no smell. In a wooden house, you sense resin. In an old room, fabric and paper. But here smells are minimal, so perception narrows to sound and temperature. You can hear snow crunching softly somewhere in the corridor under footsteps, air barely rustling in the ventilation, your own heart gradually slowing down. For many, this turns out to be a rare kind of silence, the kind almost impossible to find in the city. At the same time, the entire experience is designed to remain not an ordeal, but a controlled adventure. In ice hotels, there are always warm spaces nearby. Changing rooms, bathrooms, lobbies where you can warm up at any moment without explaining anything or proving toughness. Staff say directly, if you feel anxious, go out, it's normal, because safety matters more than checking the box. And it's precisely this ability to instantly return to warmth that transforms an ancient practice into a modern tourist format without risk. Interestingly, the very idea of a seasonal ice building emphasizes the impermanence familiar to northern cultures. Snow shelters weren't built for ages, but for one camp, one night, one crossing. And there was wisdom in this. Nature changes, and shelter must be able to leave with winter. Ice hotels live by the same rhythm. They're built, decorated, occupied, and then in spring, they melt and return to water. You get architecture that knows the date of its disappearance in advance, and because of this, it seems even quieter. The Finnish city of Kemi became one of the symbols of this seasonality. The snow castle there was first built in 1996, and since then, the city has assembled a new version almost every season, with different halls and corridors. Norwegian Alta and Swedish Jukkasjärvi also turned winter into a workshop where artists, carvers, and engineers come. And in Jukkasjärvi in 2016, Ice Hotel 365 appeared, part of the complex where cold is maintained by technology and solar energy, so the ice doesn't depend on the calendar. And here, a subtle question arises. What's more important, the natural season or the human desire to extend the miracle? But even in the most technological versions, the night remains physical and simple. Before sleep, you're recommended to use the bathroom beforehand because you don't want to get up from the warm cocoon, and extra movements cool you down. It's better not to keep your phone in the open air. The battery loses charge faster in the cold, and this is a small reminder that cold changes daily life. Water in a bottle can turn icy, and breath into a white cloud. And in such little things, Arctic reality suddenly emerges, only in soft, safe edges. Morning in an ice room usually comes not with an alarm, but with a sensation. You wake up because your body has already slept enough, not because you have to. Inside the sleeping bag, it's still warm, and for a second, you don't understand where you are until you see the ice pattern next to your face. Often guests are brought a hot drink, tea, coffee, or berry juice, and that first sip in the frozen air seems especially vivid, as if taste intensifies from the cold. And in this moment comes a quiet pride. You didn't just spend the night, you touched an ancient way of living in winter. The most curious thing is that this experience changes your attitude toward cold, even at home. People start dressing differently, paying more attention to dry footwear, to wind, to layers, to the fact that warmth isn't always a thick jacket, but sometimes the right pause and the right bedding. And the longer you think about it, the clearer you hear the common theme of the North. You can't defeat nature, but you can learn to talk with it, quietly, precisely, and without unnecessary words, as if there's another night ahead. When evening at the Ice Hotel approaches night, everything around begins to work like a deliberate ritual, not as extreme. You're guided through steps that were once a necessity for survival and have now become a gentle script for an experience. There's no heroism here, just plenty of precision. What to wear, when to warm up, how not to sweat, where to put things, how to breathe. And in this precision, calm unexpectedly appears, as if the cold agreed to the rules with you in advance. First, you're almost always given time to cool down properly after dinner, not with cold, but by slowing the pace. In such places, they often remind you that heavy food and alcohol are poor allies for sleeping at -5 degrees Celsius. They create a false sensation of heat, dilate blood vessels, and then can lead to rapid cooling once you're motionless. So the evening here is usually quiet, with hot tea, berry drinks, and unhurried conversation. And the less fuss, the easier it is for the body to fulfill its part of the ancient deal. Then comes the sauna moment, not as an attraction, but as launching a system. The warm room sharply raises the temperature of skin and muscles, releases tension from the day's cold, and, most importantly, creates a heat reserve before the short transition to the ice section. But you'll almost always be told an important thing. It's good to enter the sauna, but you need to exit without rushing and without running, so you don't sweat. Sweat is water, and water in frost turns into a tool that takes away heat faster than any scary temperature. Next, a short walk down the corridor where the air is already different, dry, dense, as if you've entered a refrigerator, but without kitchen smells and plastic. This dry cold is important. It's precisely what helps the ice remain stable, and the carved walls not get covered with a wet film. In practice, this means it's often more comfortable inside the hotel than outside at the same temperature, because there's no wind and no dampness. And here appears the first surprise. You start to believe that everything really is calculated. In the changing room, they repeat simple things that sound almost childish but save the night. Remove the excess. Leave only thermal underwear, wool socks, and a hat. Remove wet layers. Check if your hair is dry. Thermal underwear here is important not for warmth, but for moisture management. It should wick it away from the skin so you don't wake up from the sensation of damp cold. And often, it's precisely this invisible work of the fabric that determines whether sleep will be deep. Then you enter the ice room, and your gaze catches not the cold, but the light. Lighting in the ice makes the surface alive. Somewhere it's blue, somewhere milky, somewhere almost transparent, with thin lines resembling tree rings. Many hotels invite sculptors and designers, and each season the rooms change. Sometimes arches and lace appear on the walls, sometimes reliefs of animals, sometimes abstract forms. And you suddenly realize you'll be sleeping inside a temporary museum that will disappear in spring. The most important thing in the room isn't the walls, but the bed, because cold is most dangerous from below. The base is almost always ice, monolithic, like a pedestal, and on it lies a wooden frame creating an air gap. On top, they lay a thick layer of reindeer skins, sometimes in several rows, because the fur of the northern reindeer is designed to trap air and prevent heat from escaping into the ice mass. This isn't decorative northern exotica, but very old engineering, just in beautiful packaging. When you unfold the sleeping bag, it seems too powerful for just -5. But this is done deliberately. The sleeping bag has a reserve, rated for example at -30 degrees Celsius, so that a stable microclimate forms inside even for someone who gets cold more than average. You tighten the hood, leave a small opening for breathing, and it's as if you're closing a zipper, not on fabric, but on the boundary between two worlds. At this moment, the room becomes very quiet, and this is silence that seems to teach you not to hurry. The first 20 to 30 minutes, the body conducts negotiations with the new environment. Skin blood vessels constrict to conserve heat. The brain carefully monitors fingers and toes, and any movement seems too loud, even the rustle of the sleeping bag. But then a shift happens. You stop waiting for cold and start feeling warmth accumulating inside the insulation. And the strangest thing is that sleep comes precisely then, as if it always knew the way here. This effect is well understood from a physiological standpoint. The body at rest still produces heat, and in an enclosed volume, It's retained by air layers inside the insulation. A small atmosphere forms where temperature and humidity stabilize if you didn't sweat and if the sleeping bag didn't get wet. The face, meanwhile, remains in cool air. Breathing becomes more even, and many note they sleep more deeply because of the freshness. And here, a subtle detail appears. Comfort is created not by heat, but by balance. The historical memory of this balance among northern peoples was practical, without romance. Inuit snow shelters worked not because it's warm inside, but because snow blocks wind and holds a dry layer of air, and the entrance was often made below floor level, so warm air would stay at the top. Among the Sámi, who migrated with reindeer, the key resource became skins and proper bedding, because a fire isn't always possible or safe in a blizzard. And when a modern tourist lies on reindeer fur in an ice room, they're repeating a pattern that was once a matter of life. The only difference is that today, this pattern is framed with insurance and care. At any moment, you can go out to a warm room, warm up, ask for help, and no one will test your toughness. Hotels plan routes, lighting, non-slip surfaces in advance, and staff explain what to do if you suddenly feel anxious or cold. This is an important shift. The ancient technique remained, but the risk was removed, like sharp stones from a path. Even sound in such places works for safety. You almost always hear that life is nearby. Somewhere, a door closes quietly. Snow crunches in the distance under footsteps. Sometimes a staff member walks down the corridor checking that everything is okay. This simple audibility transforms ice isolation into a feeling of security, like in a night train where you're alone in the compartment, but know the train is moving on rails. And sleep becomes not an ordeal, but a journey inside silence. A night in an ice hotel also differs in that time feels different. In the darkness of the winter north, there are no bright city signals, no familiar noise, and the brain more quickly lowers the revs. Many wake up once, not from cold but from unusual silence, as if someone turned off the world, and then fall asleep again even deeper. And somewhere in the middle of the night comes a simple discovery. Cold outside doesn't equal cold inside your cocoon. Morning usually begins not with cold, but with the desire to stretch, because inside the sleeping bag, it's still comfortable. You unzip, and the cool air touches your face more clearly than water, as if helping you wake up without effort. Often a hot drink is already waiting in the warm zone, and the first sip after the ice room seems surprisingly rich, as if flavors become louder in the frost. And in this moment, you understand. The night wasn't about courage, but about knowledge that turned out to be older than you. And then, when you go outside and see how the ice building stands on the snow, its main idea becomes noticeable: impermanence. Such hotels are built every winter anew from ice and snow. Often ice is taken from nearby rivers, and in spring everything returns to water, without a permanent foundation and without a trace in the earth. This is a very northern attitude toward home. It can be solid for a season and disappear on time, not arguing with nature. And in this disappearance is hidden another hook. If everything melts, it means next winter, the story will have to be built anew. There's a quiet moment in the middle of the night when you suddenly realize you're lying not in the frost, but in a system assembled from small, very ancient solutions. Wind has nowhere to get in. There's almost no moisture, and your heat doesn't leak into the ice because it was stopped by wood and fur. This is how people slept in the north for centuries. It's just that back then, it was necessary. And now it's become an experience carefully packaged into a hotel ritual. And the calmer you breathe, the clearer this invisible continuity sounds. Inuit snow dwellings are often described as ice houses, but something else is more important. They were built from packed snow, not pure ice, because snow better holds an air layer. Inside, they thought through the dome shape and a low entrance tunnel, so warm air would stay higher and cold air would settle closer to the exit. This was architecture that worked without stoves and radiators, where the main resource was one's own heat and dryness. A modern ice hotel is arranged differently, but the principle of preserving air as insulation still lives in it. Among the Sámi, who migrated across northern Scandinavia, overnight stay often meant a short, economical sleep near harnesses and the herd, where the main thing was not to let cold reach from below. Hence the respect for fur, especially reindeer skins, which aren't just soft but technologically advanced by nature. Their hair traps air and sharply reduces heat loss. When you see skins in an ice hotel, it's easy to take them for decoration, but essentially, this is the same answer from the tundra to the question, how to lie down on cold and not lose. And the most interesting twist is that this solution has barely become outdated. Polar expeditions of the 19th and early 20th centuries added one more thing to ancient practices, the discipline of details. In diaries and reports of explorers, themes of dry socks, airing out sleeping bags, protection from wind, and mandatory bedding constantly surface. The Norwegian school of polar travel, associated with the names of Fridtjof Nansen and Roald Amundsen, relied on practicality, less dampness, fewer unnecessary movements, more predictability. And if you listen to the briefing at an ice hotel, it sounds almost like an echo of these rules. The subtlest knowledge of the North is distrust of quick heat. You can warm up with a fire, sauna, or hot drink, but if you then sweat and stop, wet fabric will start cooling more strongly than any wind. That's why ice hotels so insistently recommend, after the sauna, don't run, don't put on extra layers, don't turn the sleeping bag into a greenhouse. There's no romance in this, only physics and experience tested by generations, and it's precisely here that modern comfort unexpectedly teaches old self-control. If you look at the ice room itself as a shelter, it resembles an ancient snow refuge, not in material, but in idea. Remove air movement and maintain stable temperature. Inside, they keep around -5 degrees Celsius, also because it's a safe compromise for the structure. Ice doesn't melt, carvings don't soften, corridors stay dry. You're not fighting the cold of the walls, you're separated from it by layers, and the cold outside simply helps the building stay intact. The paradox is that frost here acts as the guardian of architecture. Building such hotels each season resembles not the hotel business, but a ritual. In Sweden and Jukkasjärvi, ice is traditionally taken from the Torne River. In winter, it becomes especially transparent because it freezes slowly and evenly. In Finland and Kemi, the snow complex was long known as a seasonal castle that changed shape every year, as if the city was redrawing its winter map. In Norway near Alta, the ice hotel at Sorisniva was built as part of an Arctic experience where the location itself dictates the style. More snow, more space, more silence. And all these places have something in common. In spring, they disappear without a trace. This disappearing architecture makes sleep especially strange. You understand you're sleeping inside a building that has no future in the usual sense. It won't survive the warmth, won't become old, won't grow cracks of time. It's created for one winter, like a snow shelter for one camp. And in this, there's the calm honesty of the North. Everything is temporary while it works. From such a thought, sleep often becomes even deeper because the desire to control everything disappears. And control, strangely enough, usually interferes with falling asleep. The interior arrangement of the room also speaks the language of practice. The ice bed looks like a sculpture, but its meaning is to provide firm support that doesn't deform and doesn't accumulate moisture. And then, the layered cake of insulation does the work. The wooden frame creates an air gap, skins dampen the cold, and a modern insulating mat picks up what used to be compensated by fur thickness. The sleeping bag closes the system, turning it into a personal microclimate where your heat isn't lost. And the more precisely the layers are arranged, the less you think about temperature at all. The briefing usually includes things that seem funny until you try them. For example, the advice to keep your phone and power bank closer to your body or in a warm place, because in the cold, the battery drains faster. Simple chemistry that suddenly becomes part of daily life. Or the recommendation not to breathe completely inside the sleeping bag to avoid moistening the insulation with condensation. Such details return you to a state of attentiveness familiar to anyone who has ever spent a night in real cold. And it's precisely attentiveness that plays the role of a comforting blanket here. At the same time, the tourist version fundamentally differs from the historical one in the main thing: the ability to go out into warmth without consequences. In traditional conditions, a mistake could mean frostbite or exhaustion. But here there are warm rooms nearby, staff, lit pathways, and clear rules. Some hotels have night patrols and clear routes to the warm zone, so anxiety doesn't have time to grow. This doesn't cancel respect for cold, but removes risk, leaving the experience. And such a compromise is also a sign of modernity. There's another historical echo that's heard already in the morning: the feeling that you've relearned to sleep. Modern people are used to sleep being softness, silence, and plus 22 degrees. But the North reminds, sleep can be different if you properly arrange the boundaries. When you wake up and realize the night passed calmly, the brain fixes a new support. It's not necessary to defeat the elements. It's enough to properly negotiate with them. And this agreement seems surprisingly ancient, as if it was waiting for you to finally remember it. Sometimes people say that in an ice room they had more vivid dreams, as if the cold cleared the space of excess. Perhaps it's simply the fresh air, silence, and rare feeling of security inside a sleeping bag that's tighter than any blanket. But there's another thought. When familiar signals of civilization disappear around you, the brain more willingly goes into depth, like a reflection of the sky goes into winter water. And if you listen to this depth, it becomes curious what other old ways of sleeping we've forgotten, and where they're hiding today. Sometimes the most astonishing thing about an ice hotel isn't the sleep itself, but the thought that you're sleeping inside a building that was recently part of a river. The ice used for the walls and beds once lived its natural life, and now it's become corridors, arches, and patterns of light shaped by human hands. The North performs a rare trick. It takes what usually frightens us and turns it into a space for rest. And the more closely you look at the ice, the more you want to understand how such a one-season home is born in the first place. Construction begins long before guests arrive, when winter has fully settled in and the temperature stays below zero not for hours, but for weeks. In Jukkasjärvi, the ice is traditionally harvested from the Torne River. Large blocks are cut and stacked carefully so they don't crack or turn cloudy. The ice must be clear and dense, with minimal air bubbles, so it holds shape better and transmits light beautifully. And here comes the first intrigue of the season. The same material looks a little different every year, as if the river leaves a new signature each winter. At the same time, snow is prepared, not just as a snowbank, but as a building material. It's often compacted and shaped because dense snow can hold an arch almost like stone if you calculate radius and thickness correctly. That's why ice hotels love vaults and tunnels. The dome shape distributes the load and keeps the structure stable as long as the frost holds. This mirrors the ancient idea behind snow shelters, not to fight nature, but to use its properties. And when you walk down a snowy corridor, you're walking through engineering disguised as a fairy tale. Then the artists take over, and the hotel becomes a gallery where the exhibits can be experienced with your eyes all night long. Since the 1990s, Jukkasjärvi has invited sculptors and designers from around the world to create new rooms and halls each season. This tradition grew out of that same accidental overnight stay in a snow pavilion in the late 1980s, when the idea of sleeping among ice was first taken seriously. Since then, ice hotels have become not only places to stay, but also creative studios where architecture lives exactly as long as winter does. The strangest thing is that impermanence here isn't a flaw, it's the main artistic statement. Finland added its own character. In Kemi, the snow castle first built in 1996 changes layout every season, as if the city is rewriting its winter legend year after year. Norway followed a similar path in the early 2000s. Around Alta, seasonal ice complexes became part of an Arctic travel route, emphasizing not just icy walls, but the feeling of vastness, silence, and polar night. And further northeast in Kirkenes, the snow hotel embedded the idea of sleeping in the cold into a broader northern experience with dog sleds and winter excursions. Together, they form a geography of sleep, each region with its own emphasis, and that only deepens the fascination. But behind all the beauty lies strict maintenance that guests rarely see. The temperature inside the ice areas is kept at around -5 degrees Celsius, not for effect, but for structural stability. The ice doesn't start crying, and snow forms don't lose their shape. Staff monitor the ventilation and make sure the floors stay safe and dry, because in such places, safety begins at your feet. They also constantly check the doors between warm and cold zones, since excess heat is the enemy, not of humans, but of the structure itself. And here arises a paradox. Guest comfort depends entirely on the integrity of the cold. Sleep itself remains purely northern in its logic, not to heat the room, but to heat the person. Guests are given sleeping bags rated for -30 degrees, creating an internal buffer of warmth even for those who get cold quickly. Thermal underwear, wool socks, and a hat are not about layering up like a cabbage, but about keeping the skin dry and minimizing heat loss through extremities. The key lies beneath you: wood, reindeer hides, insulating mats, because heat escapes downward faster than we think. And when everything is layered correctly, you nearly stop thinking about numbers, even though they're all around you. There's a fine boundary that the staff usually mention calmly, without drama. Comfort in the cold doesn't break from -5. It breaks from moisture and haste. If you overheat in the sauna, sweat, then stop moving. You've created your own problem that the cold will only make visible. That's why the bedtime ritual feels like an ancient manual rewritten for tourism. Warm up, relax, change into dry clothes, move quickly, lie down immediately. It's not a test, but a sequence. And in the right sequence comes a meditative sense of control. After that, the most interesting part begins. Your body does the rest without you. For the first 30 minutes, the body stays alert, because the cool air on your face keeps reminding you of the temperature. But inside the sleeping bag, Warmth gathers quickly into a stable microclimate, which becomes your real room, while the ice walls are just an outer shell. Many people note how easy it is to breathe. The air is dry and fresh, and how the silence seems to mute even your inner thoughts. And it's not an empty silence. You can almost hear yourself unwind, feel the tension fade, and sense sleep deepening. At some point, you realize you're not in the cold, but in protection, and that changes everything. The historical echoes here are felt not in words, but in the body. Inuit snow dwellings and Sámi reindeer camps both taught the same lesson. The real threats are wind and dampness. The real protection is air held in layers. Modern ice hotels preserve that same principle, but add the safety net of civilization. Heated rooms nearby, an easy exit at any time, a hot drink in the morning, clear rules. That makes the experience safe but not hollow, because your body still reenacts an ancient pattern of adaptation. And that's how modern comfort quietly returns us old knowledge, softly, without risk, but convincingly. There's one more detail that ties everything together. In spring, these hotels disappear, and that too is part of their historical meaning. For northern cultures, temporary shelters were the norm, built for the moment, then abandoned, leaving no heavy trace. A seasonal ice hotel follows that same rhythm. Built, filled, admired, then melting back into the water that birthed it. And when you realize that your building is already destined to become a river again, the night feels even rarer, as if you've lived inside a moment in time. And in the morning, when you step out of the sleeping bag and take your first breath of the cool room air, a calm clarity appears in your mind. You now know from experience that warmth isn't just about radiators and blankets. It's about the right layers, dryness, and the ability to stay still. And the most surprising thing is how differently you start to see winter. Not as an enemy, but as a medium you can live in, if you remember a few simple rules. And here's where the next question takes shape. If an ice hotel is a safe version of ancient survival, what other ways of sleeping the northern way might be hiding in everyday life, just beyond the door? In an ice hotel, the cold feels almost secondary when the polar night reigns outside. In these latitudes, winter sometimes makes the day so short that twilight never fully turns into morning, and sleep feels less like a pause and more like a natural continuation of darkness. City life teaches us to fight sleep with the light of screens, but here the light seems to retreat on its own, giving you permission to slow down. And it's in this darkness that the ice room begins to act like a cradle, even though it looks like a palace. Looking back at old northern ways of sleeping, it becomes clear. For centuries, people slept not by the clock, but by the conditions. For hunters and nomads, rhythm was determined by wind, fatigue, and the chance to find shelter. Sometimes it was wiser to lie down earlier than scheduled, because the road or frost would be harsher tomorrow. A modern traveler in an ice hotel suddenly finds themselves in the same principle. Don't force wakefulness. Listen to the body. The transition from schedule to sensation usually happens faster than expected. In the hotel's warm area before bedtime, the lights are often dimmed, a small detail that the body reacts to instantly. When the light softens, the brain slips more easily into a rest state, and sounds, in the hallways, in conversation, begin to seem quieter, not because there are fewer of them, but because you stop holding on to daytime tension. In the North, darkness has always been a friend to sleep, as long as it's safe. And here lies the hook. In an ice hotel, darkness is safe by arrangement, not by chance. Among the Inuit, the traditional source of calm light was the kulak, a stone lamp burning seal oil, giving off a steady, gentle flame without glare. That light wasn't just about coziness, but survival. It warmed, illuminated, dried clothes, and set the rhythm of life when months of winter darkness pressed outside the walls. There are no lamps like that in ice hotels today, but the principle remains. Light should help you rest, not argue with rest. It's strange to realize how modern design sometimes echoes ancient care, almost word for word. Silence in the ice section is another story, because ice absorbs sound differently than wood or concrete. It doesn't ring constantly, as people imagine. It softens the space, making it hushed, as if sound sinks into the cold air. You hear footsteps less often, voices from farther away, and what's left is elemental. Breathing, the rustle of the sleeping bag zipper, the faint crunch of snow beyond the door. It's almost the perfect environment for sleep, and many are surprised at how quickly they drift off because of this acoustics. That acoustics also carry another sensation, the feeling of safe isolation. In the old days, silence during a snowbound night could be unsettling, signaling no people nearby, no help, uncertain weather. But in a modern ice hotel, silence becomes gentle solitude. You know the warm zone is close, staff are present, corridors are lit, and exits are clear. This changes the quality of darkness. It doesn't threaten, it soothes, because risk exists outside its boundaries. And here's a subtle trade-off. You experience the ancient comfort of shelter without the ancient fear. Northern peoples, including the Sámi, treated sleep as part of the journey, not as a separate room. For nomads, the key skill was to settle quickly and recover fast, even amid snow and wind, surrounded by gear and animals. Hence the respect for simple, proven materials: wool, fur, a dry base, and protection from drafts. When an ice hotel provides wool socks and a hat, it looks like hospitality, but in truth, it repeats the old logic. Warmth begins with small losses, and often it's socks that decide how peacefully the night passes. There's also a small science about the face that stays outside the sleeping bag in cool air. Inside the cocoon, body heat quickly creates a microclimate, but if you breathe too much inside, humidity rises and the insulation can start collecting condensation. Not romantic, just inefficient. So the proper breathing hole isn't a minor detail. It's a rule that sounds almost like the advice of polar explorers. The trick is that this tiny stream of air doesn't make sleep colder. It keeps it stable. The body can be cautious for the first 30 minutes. You feel the coolness on your cheeks, and the brain keeps scanning, checking that all is well. But inside a steady sleeping bag, the body soon stops paying attention to the surrounding temperature and switches to restoration, the real goal of sleep. In this environment, it's easy to feel the difference between cold around and cold to you, because outside it can be -5 degrees Celsius, while inside there's steady warmth without overheating. Once that difference registers, tension usually fades almost instantly. Interestingly, most ice hotels advise against turning the overnight stay into a test of toughness. Don't sleep in outdoor clothes. Don't stage a character check. It's far better to trust the gear and the old northern logic of layers. Dry thermal base, wool, hat, a solid sleeping bag rated to -30, and most importantly, a warm base of hides and insulation. The setup looks simple, but it unites knowledge from tundra life, expeditions, and sports medicine. The twist is that simplicity turns out to be the most advanced kind of knowledge. Northern sleep has another effect that few expect. In the morning, you may feel more refreshed than after a regular hotel. The reason is not mystical, but physical. Fresh, cold air, No overheating, silence, and almost no background noise that clutters city nights. You wake not because traffic starts humming or a radiator kicks in, but because your body has decided rest is complete. And many people realize they've forgotten what a peaceful awakening feels like. Then you return to the warm zone, and the contrast works its magic again. The hot drink tastes stronger, the warmth feels softer, and your skin seems to remember what comfort means. The transition mirrors an ancient northern rhythm: warm up, dry out, restore, return to the cold. Only now you do it for pleasure, not survival. Yet the body takes the experience seriously, as if recording a new instruction for the future. And here's the next hook. If darkness and cold can lull you so gently, what other northern ways of sleeping might still exist, without walls, without heat, yet built on a deep understanding of the human body? Sometimes, stepping out of the ice room into a warm space in the morning brings not just relief, but genuine surprise. The night passed quietly, and your body feels more refreshed than after a soft bed at home. That calm clarity after sleeping in the cold is no coincidence. Almost everyone who stayed in Scandinavia's ice hotels, from Jukkasjärvi to Kemi, mentions it. Modern physiology explains it simply. A cool microclimate improves circulation, slows metabolism, and reduces inflammation, while the brain receives a signal that it's safe to rest. But ancient peoples knew the same thing long before science. They simply called it differently. Sleep in the earth, sleep in the snow, sleep under fur. In Inuit tales and Sámi legends, great attention was always paid to the practical details of sleep. Their shelters, domed igloos, snow pits, fur bedding, were designed to help the body preserve internal warmth without strain. The guiding idea was simple. You heat not the air, but yourself and your surroundings. Those principles later shaped 20th century polar engineering, from Amundsen's expeditions to modern Antarctic research stations. Wherever humans meet cold, the meaning of warmth returns to three essentials: insulation, dryness, stillness. You can feel all three when you lie down on reindeer skins beneath a sleeping bag surrounded by ice. Modern ice hotels use that ancient principle, but turn it into a comfortable ritual. Everything is arranged so that a person experiences a winter night not as a challenge, but as a revelation. Before sleep, hot drinks, maybe a moment by the fire or sauna, soft conversation. After that, a slow transition to silence, dry air, steady breathing. There's no mysticism here, only psychology. When the body receives clear, predictable steps, it stops worrying and the mind allows rest. It's not just comfort design. It's a quiet rediscovery of harmony with nature, once instinctive, now tenderly relearned. Sleeping at -5 degrees inside an ice room recreates a contrast northern peoples have known for millennia. Sharp cold outside, soft heat within. In old Sámi camps, that inner warmth came from tents made of hides, where the fire heated the top air while the bottom stayed slightly cool. The result was balance. No sweating, no stifling heat, just deep rest. Modern travelers experience the same dynamic safely and beautifully. If you pay attention, you can almost feel the body remembering its old habit, not to fight the cold, but to live alongside it. Psychologists observing people after nights in ice hotels note something intriguing. Most describe a feeling of cleansing or reset, even if they didn't fall asleep right away. It might be tied to a rare sensory experience. Our modern brains, constantly overloaded with light, sound, and smell, finally encounter true silence. No glowing screens, no artificial colors, just rest for the senses. The absence of distractions brings perception back to something primordial, returning the body to its natural rhythm of breathing and sleep. It's as if an ancient protocol, long archived in the human system, switches itself on again. At the heart of it all lies Northern philosophy, the wisdom of impermanence. Every spring, the ice and snow melt, returning completely to the rivers they came from. It isn't destruction, but continuity. One year ends, another begins. The water freezes again to become next winter's walls. In Northern mythology, this cycle isn't loss, but the planet breathing. Sleep inside an ice hotel becomes part of that rhythm. You rest within architecture that's meant to exist for only one season, quietly reminding you that everything in nature must learn to change. When the thaw arrives, locals often describe it as a farewell to a friend. Water runs through the same channels where the blocks were cut, leaving no trace, no debris. It's the opposite of our southern obsession with permanence. The North teaches the reverse. Value lies not in duration, but in the purity of renewal. What melts away makes space for what's next. A night inside such fleeting architecture becomes symbolic, a temporary forgetting after which you awaken renewed. You might say ice hotels have given people back the ability to sleep as they once did, in a world where the natural and the physical aren't divided. The walls here are literally alive. They breathe, shift hue, respond to light, even faintly ring with temperature changes. These aren't silent plastics or dead stone. Spending a night in such a space brings a quiet sense of belonging, as if you're part of a great process, not an observer, but a companion to the cold that has decided to be kind. That same belonging once existed when people slept in nature itself, in nomadic camps, snow shelters, caves, or platforms carved from ice. What all these forms of sleep shared was a thinner boundary between human and world. Technology now allows that thinness again, safe yet authentic in feeling. That's why so many guests leave saying they've begun to notice the wind more, to really see snow's texture, to listen to silence's variations. The true value isn't the extreme, but the return of lost sensitivity. And perhaps that feeling explains the popularity of ice hotels more than photographs or awards ever could. People don't always seek warmth, they seek meaning. That night at -5, where everything is calm and nothing needs proving, gently reminds us that nature isn't just a backdrop, but a co-author of human emotion, cold, silence, and ice. Here play not the role of a trial, but of a teacher. They whisper that we can still live well in what once seemed impossible. And everyone who spends a night inside carries away more than an experience. They carry a small piece of ancient northern wisdom, to trust the cold just enough for it to turn into warmth. When the icy night ends, a barely noticeable wonder occurs. You wake up without a chill, even though everything around you is still ice and -5 degrees. That's the main paradox of northern sleep. It doesn't matter how cold the environment is if you've learned not to lose your own warmth. The secret seems to lie in the sleeping bag or the hides, but in truth, it's in the body's ability to hold balance between movement and stillness, between breath and dryness. Here, warmth becomes not just physics, but a form of knowledge, refined by northern peoples over centuries. In traditional Sámi life, that knowledge was literal, embodied in clothing, rhythm, and one's relationship with the wind. The Sámi used to say, "The wind teaches you how to dress, because each current of cold revealed where insulation failed, where fabric was damp, where movements were too sharp." The ability to feel oneself inside weather was a life skill, like navigation or hunting. A modern guest in an ice hotel unknowingly practices the same lesson, only under supervision and comfort. They start noticing how their body reacts to cold, which muscles tighten when exhalation lengthens, where heat escapes faster. In that quiet awareness already lives a kind of reconnection with nature. The Inuit of the Arctic coast had a simple philosophy of warmth. Survival comes not from cold, but with it. Just as you don't fight snow's weight, but spread it evenly. In the cold, you seek cooperation, not resistance. They knew that if the shelter was too airtight, humidity would turn into an enemy, so they allowed small airflows into the igloo to keep breathing air dry. Ice hotels follow the same principle. Ventilated domes, moisture control, stable sub-zero air. It's the same ancient rule. Warmth doesn't come from isolating yourself from the world, but from exchanging with it properly. Modern engineers building Scandinavian ice complexes often say they're not constructing buildings, but temperature experiences. The ice here is alive, clearer by day, bluish matte by night, dotted with crystals in the morning like traces of breath. That animates the cold, turning it from something to consume into something to contemplate. When a person lies down among such walls, they see, for the first time in a long while, matter not as a threat, but as a companion. Ice doesn't endanger you. It holds shape, reflects light, and keeps your silence. Physiologists note that cool environments deepen stages of slow-wave sleep. Around 15 degrees Celsius, the body activates restorative functions, lowers cortisol, and balances blood pressure. In ice hotels, that effect is amplified by contrast, preheating the body, cooling during sleep, warming again in the morning. This thermal rhythm almost perfectly mirrors the ancient Scandinavian cycle of sauna and ice bathing. Heat up, cool down, recover. For Northerners, it wasn't recreation, but a disciplined method of maintaining clarity and flexibility of body and mind. That's why sleeping at -5, contrary to expectations, doesn't exhaust. It restores. During the first half hour, the body adjusts cautiously, then activates its thermal balance systems. Breathing slows, blood vessels find rhythm, skin temperature drops, while core warmth remains steady. It's not stress, it's adaptation, known to humans long before thermometers existed. Which means anyone spending a night in ice now lives, for a moment, by the old rules, just with electricity and a hot shower waiting in the morning. Interestingly, guests who fill out surveys after an ice hotel night rarely mention cold at all. They speak of feeling clean. That sensation appears when the body, for once, stops fighting overheating and the background noise of modern comfort. With fewer stimuli, sleep becomes almost primal, and the brain experiences it as release from civilization's buzz. It's as if all excess static drains away, not just sound, but the inner restlessness tied to daily life. And in that quiet suspension, some realize for the first time that silence can be a physical state. This understanding resonates deeply with ancient Northern philosophy, what we'd now call ecological. At its core lies harmony with Earth's processes, where every temperature has meaning and needs no conquest. People once simply accepted what winter brought and built their rituals around it, from how they slept to what they ate. As ice hotels turned that worldview into tourism, they quietly revived the old idea of stable cold as a state of balance. Cold doesn't vanish if you stop fearing it. It's the gentle instruction of winter sensed anew by modern minds. The experience of sleeping on ice has even inspired researchers to create cold rooms in regular hotels. Some Swedish and Finnish properties now include cooled suites kept around 13 degrees to simulate the calm of northern sleep without the extremes. It's a direct legacy of the ice hotels, a recognition that temperature can shape rest as profoundly as design or decor. In that way, Arctic sleep philosophy is quietly entering cities where winter long ago lost its voice. But what's most profound in this phenomenon isn't architecture or science. It's the return of bodily literacy. We're learning again to read cold, not as danger, but as dialogue with the world. When the body endures -5 and remains comfortable, it seems to whisper, "I remember how." This knowledge can't be taught in theory. It returns only through sensation. That's why ice hotels are more than attractions. They're schools of sensitivity, where temperature itself is the teacher. And the next chapter of this story will be about what happens afterward. How someone who's spent a night in ice starts hearing their own breath differently, treating warmth differently, even seeing their ordinary bed in a new way. Because the real gift of Arctic sleep is that it continues, long after the ice has melted. Returning from an ice hotel to the normal, warm world often becomes an unexpected experience. The first thing almost everyone notices is how loud ordinary air feels. City sounds seem sharp, the light excessive, the warmth sticky, as if the room itself has lost balance. After a night in ice, the body keeps its inner silence and steady breathing for several hours, like a lingering calm. It's almost like jet lag, only not geographical but thermal, a difference between two speeds of life. That post-cold stillness resembles the state cultivated in mindfulness practices. Psychologists even call staying in ice hotels a form of natural meditation. Minimal stimuli, steady breath, even heartbeat. You don't have to try to calm down. The body does it for you. It's remarkable how a single night among snow and ice can tune your system more deeply than weeks at a resort. And this is not a metaphor, but measurable physiology. Lower pulse, steadier sleep cycles, balanced blood pressure. It's no coincidence that many guests describe a sense of renewal, not just physical, but emotional. In Northern Europe, it's become a kind of ritual reset after urban life. Some people return every winter, not for novelty, but for the feeling of being rebooted. Scandinavian culture has always revolved around contrast. Summer and winter, light and dark, heat and frost. Sleeping at -5 fits perfectly into that rhythm as an act of mental hygiene, reminding you that fluidity is healthier than rigidity. After such a night, you begin to notice small things. How dry air sharpens sense, how sound feels cleaner without background noise, how a single source of light can feel sufficient. In daily life, we rarely ask why we crave excess. Too warm, too bright, too loud. The ice hotel strips away those two mooshes, and the brain seems to sigh in gratitude for the simplicity. Back home, some people start sleeping with a window open, turning down heat, removing extra lamps. Ancient wisdom quietly becomes a new form of everyday ecology. Of course, not everyone experiences the cold the same way. For some, it's just a beautiful adventure. For others, it stirs a deep familiarity, a memory of something primal. They often say they finally understood that silence also has a temperature. It's neither warm nor cold. It's steady and neutral, like breath beneath ice. Try holding on to that feeling for a few days, and everything else softens. Conversation, work, even your own thoughts. Ice hotels also, unintentionally, teach a new kind of discipline. You can't rush or check your phone endlessly. The cold creates natural pauses. You plan each action, change clothes quickly, fall asleep calmly, wake without haste. These small acts restore the body's memory of slowness, something everyday life erases. And it's slowness that makes northern sleep so deep. It stretches time so you live not just through the night, but through every quiet breath within it. There's an old Norwegian saying, "Cold is no enemy if you know its name." It fits modern ice hotels perfectly. They've given the cold a gentler name, a steady companion, and shown that frost can join the ritual of rest instead of opposing it. That's why traveling there isn't about endurance, but about trust. You enter the ice not to conquer, but to sense your boundaries, where discomfort ends and peace begins. It's knowledge you can't buy as a souvenir, yet it stays in the body like quiet, practiced confidence. Researchers studying cold sleep note another curious effect. It creates a feeling of spaciousness, even in small rooms. Inside frost-domed walls, sound and light behave differently, and the brain perceives more depth than is physically there. That sense often lingers. You start to feel that any home can expand if you strip away interruptions. The cold doesn't enlarge rooms, it widens perception. And that's perhaps the best proof that real rest depends not on temperature, but on awareness. Over time, the ice experience reveals itself as more than a novelty. It's a cultural practice that restores a sense of proportion. Ancient northern peoples measured life through moderation of light, food, movement, rest. Their survival depended not on control, but on alignment with the season. Today's ice hotels across Norway, Finland, and Sweden continue that tradition, teaching the same truth. Live with rhythm, not against it. When the ice melts in spring and returns to the rivers, that sense of balance remains. Guests leave, and architects already begin anew. Perhaps that's why Scandinavia feels so wise in winter. It never makes an enemy of the cold, but grants it time and place each year. There's no romance in that, only understanding. And if you listen closely, it's a quiet kind of knowing, like the breath of someone sleeping in ice, fully at ease until morning. The next section will explore how this culture of seasonality and trust in nature has influenced modern architecture, tourism, and climate thinking, from sustainable design to the philosophy of impermanence rooted in ancient snow shelters. Every spring in Jukkasjärvi, when the sun rises higher, the temperature climbs, and the ice returns to the Torna River, hundreds of tons of frozen water turn once again into clear, flowing streams. It's not destruction, but an intentional finale, a built-in part of the design. Architects of the ice hotels like to say with a smile, "Our buildings don't age, they flow." And that may be the purest form of architectural honesty, to build not forever, but for as long as winter lasts. This philosophy feels paradoxical in an age obsessed with permanence. Humanity designs concrete to last a century, plastic to endure for millennia, materials to resist decay. The North offers a counter lesson. Strength lies not in endurance, but in cycle. Everything made of ice is obliged to disappear, otherwise the balance breaks. In its vanishing, there is no loss, only renewal. Spring returns the ice to the river. Summer water feeds the forests. Autumn brings the freeze again. The ice hotel lives inside this loop, nature's breathing woven into design. To modern minds raised on the idea of progress, the notion of an impermanent home can seem unsettling. Yet it's becoming a symbol of ecological thinking. Architecture without residue. No waste, no long-term pollution, no heavy footprint. The concept bridges ancient survival wisdom with 21st century technology. The Inuit and the Sámi once built temporary shelters to tread lightly on the earth. Ice hotel architects do the same, though their tools are compressors, lighting systems, and thermodynamic sensors. It's the ancient art of temporary dwelling reborn in a new form. Look inside one of these structures, or even at photos of them, and every detail feels deliberate. The wall thickness, the dome curvature, the air temperature, the play of light. Illumination itself follows the architecture's pulse. Reflected beams breathe across the ice like moving air. Teams of designers and technicians work like old northern guilds. Everyone knows where ice will flex, where it might crack, where snow must reinforce. It's communal intelligence passed by practice, not by book, a living craft tradition. As technology progresses, the idea of ice architecture has inspired new branches of sustainable design. In Norway and Finland, temporary pavilions are built to dissolve with spring. In Germany, engineers are developing biodegradable materials for seasonal hotels modeled on Arctic structures. The Latin root ephemeros, lasting a day, is becoming not an artistic metaphor, but an ecological principle. Once again, Scandinavia leads by example. Here, the ability to let go is valued more than the urge to preserve. Psychologists note that temporary buildings affect people more gently than permanent ones. They remind us of fragility without fear. Knowing everything around you will melt, you stop dreading change. It's a comforting kind of acceptance. That's why seasonal ice hotels fit naturally into modern mindfulness culture. They don't just showcase nature, they teach inner alignment with it, an understanding of boundary and rhythm. Cold, ice, and time become three facets of one quiet lesson. Equally fascinating is how craft and science now work, side by side. Nearly every major ice complex doubles as a research site. Engineers test dome stability, thermal specialists measure airflow, artists study light refraction. Here, ice is both material and laboratory. By observing how it behaves under stress, builders develop new prototypes for lightweight insulation and low-energy cooling systems, innovations drawn straight from ancient survival knowledge. The Arctic past quietly informs a sustainable future. Touristically, ice complexes are cultural landmarks, yet their real legacy is philosophical. They remind us that even cold is not emptiness, but a resource, a source of beauty, inquiry, and calm. When spring dismantles them, nothing ruins the landscape. Snow carries away lines, rivers blur boundaries, nature reclaims its form. What remains is a piece of land that knows how to rest from human touch. Perhaps that is the highest kind of sustainability, not only to use a place, but to release it afterward. This idea is spreading beyond Scandinavia. In Canada, Japan, Latvia, even China, seasonal ice art installations now rise each winter, hosting festivals of light and sound. Ancient sheltercraft merges with media art, but the principle stays the same. Cold is no enemy. Ice is dialogue. Architecture is no longer resistance, but harmony with climate. Maybe this is the true modern legacy of the North, the ability to see endurance in the fleeting and harmony within the cold. Anyone who has slept at -5 beneath an ice dome and woken calm has absorbed that truth physically. When they return to ordinary walls, something remains, not just memory, but a sense of equilibrium. The ice melts, but the understanding of balance between human and environment endures. And it's that understanding, not the building itself, that makes the northern experience eternal. The next section will explore how this philosophy of cold has shaped northern tourism and identity, how people living in harsh climates turned their environment into symbols of coziness and pride. When foreigners first arrive in Scandinavia in winter, they're often struck not by the cold, but by how calm the locals seem. People stroll through the streets at -20, smiling, sipping coffee on open terraces, skiing, as if oblivious to the frost. This phenomenon even has a name: the philosophy of cold. It teaches that cold isn't misfortune, but a part of the environment, as natural as air or water. From that perspective grew a culture where even the harshest weather can feel cozy. For Scandinavians, comfort isn't limited to warmth. A crisp, frosty morning can feel just as inviting if you're dressed right and at ease. From this come the familiar words tourists love: Danish hygge, Norwegian koselig, Swedish lagom, all describing inner balance, moderation, and the quiet art of feeling right. Ice hotels fit perfectly into this philosophy, places where cold and calm meet in graceful equilibrium. They reflect a cultural tradition in which winter isn't an adversary, but a space for reflection. For the Inuit and Sámi, knowing how to live in the cold was once a matter of survival. For modern Northerners, it's become an identity. Swedes, Finns, and Norwegians take pride in their demanding climate. Right after Christmas come winter festivals, ice carnivals, cafe terraces filled with bundled patrons, and outdoor skating rinks that last until spring. It's not stubbornness. It's a mindful acceptance of conditions. Just as ice hotel builders respect the physics of sub-zero design, Northern people harmonize their rhythm with nature. They choose cooperation over resistance. Within that context, sleeping in an ice dome isn't an act of bravado. It's a kind of cultural pride. When someone says, "I spent the night in ice and was warm," they're voicing ancient Northern wisdom. When everything's prepared, cold loses power. It's an emotional thread back to the ancestors who slept under firs beneath snow. The tools have changed, but the principle endures. That's the essence of Nordic identity, the union of ancient survival instinct and modern serenity. There's a Lappish saying, "The cold keeps us together." Within it lies a near anthropological truth. Harsh climates teach cooperation, warmth achieved collectively through fire, shelter, conversation. From that grew the traditions of communal meals and long candlelit gatherings while storms rage outside. Modern ice restaurants, serving hot dishes on plates of ice, continue that ritual at a new level. Proof that warmth is most appreciated when surrounded by frost. Every detail in the north carries that lesson. Even light here has its own character. During long winter nights, the rare hours of sunshine feel like celebration. Brightness becomes a living presence. That's why lighting in ice hotels is treated almost spiritually. Soft blue, amber, or violet hues shape moods rather than spaces. The glow makes the cold look gentle. Light artists say their job is not to illuminate the ice, but to warm it with the gaze. It's a perfect metaphor for Nordic aesthetics, finding warmth not in matter, but in perception. The idea of warming with the eyes extends into daily life too. Finns know how to make spaces feel cozy through small touches. A candle on a windowsill, a wooden cup, a wool blanket on a chair, a thermos of berry juice. The same principle applies in ice hotels. Guests are welcomed not by fire, but by attentiveness. Staff explain how to use the sleeping bags, offer tea, and share the steps to a comfortable night. It's simple, tangible care, and that's what creates the feeling of home even among frozen walls. Courtesy here is just another form of warmth. This culture of naturalness explains why Scandinavia proudly presents winter as part of its brand. Tourism in the cold has become a symbol of identity. Snow castles, Arctic expeditions, northern lights, dog sled rides, ice restaurants, bedrooms made of ice. None of it is extreme anymore. These are affirmations of trust in one's land. In each, you sense what could be called northern warmth, soft, unobtrusive, found not in radiators, but in the willingness to accept the world as it is. When guests leave Scandinavia, locals often ask, "Weren't you cold?" And they almost always smile and reply, "No, I finally understood what true warmth feels like." Because warmth isn't a number on a thermometer. It's a feeling of safety and stillness. That, perhaps, is Scandinavia's greatest lesson: to see comfort in frost, to listen to silence, to respect the cold, and find harmony within it. It's knowledge you can't pack in a suitcase, but you carry it home inside you as a quiet habit of peace. The next, final section will explore why ice hotels have become more than a tourist attraction, how one short night in ice reminds us that serenity can exist even in the cold, so long as we remember the inner warmth that endures. Any story about the North eventually ends in silence, not because there's nothing left to say, but because the landscape has already said everything essential. The ice hotel is the architecture of that silence, shaped from a material that knows how to disappear. Perhaps that's why it became a cultural phenomenon, ancient survival philosophy merging with a modern search for self. Those who come here aren't chasing cold, but pause. And Scandinavia, with its centuries-deep familiarity with calm, is now offering that quiet to the world. During the first few hours inside, visitors move through a kind of awe. Everything is white, cold, impeccably clean. The air has no smell. Sounds are muffled as if behind glass. Science explains it simply. Ice reflects not only light, but sound, scattering it. Psychology adds that when external stimuli vanish, the brain lowers its frequency. Once the surprise fades, calm takes its place. That's what people come for, a tranquility that isn't curated or manufactured, but simply is, like the stillness that existed before cities. Ice as a material doesn't lie. You can't paint it, disguise it, or force it into illusion. It reveals everything, down to the air trapped inside it. In the past, people saw that transparency as honesty itself, and perhaps that's why sleeping among ice feels so cleansing. You rest in transparency, where nothing is hidden, neither in nature nor within yourself. It's a rare experience in an age overrun with layers and symbols. Here, clarity itself becomes freedom. Architects of northern hotels say their challenge isn't only to preserve cold, but to create acoustic vacuum. In ordinary buildings, there's always a hum. Electric wires, ventilation, distant traffic. Snow and ice make none. Polar explorers called it physical silence. It doesn't just surround you, it enters you. You begin to hear with your body. The rhythm of your pulse grows louder, and suddenly you realize warmth is the sound within. That sound exists only where everything else stops. The founder of Sweden's ice hotel once said, "We don't build rooms, we build emotions." It's only half metaphor. Every year, dozens of creators, engineers, lighting designers, sculptors, craft halls that last only months. Each balances art against physics. Beauty alone isn't enough. Ice has weight, and gravity doesn't forgive mistakes. So every aesthetic decision is reinforced by calculus. The result feels like a chapel of labor, where creativity and stability hold equal sacredness. In truth, the ice hotel perfectly mirrors the rhythm of northern life. First comes labor, cutting blocks, hauling ice, planning domes. Then comes art, the carvings, the play of light, the stunning geometry. Then the season itself, Guests arrive, sleep, sip something warm, watch the aurora, and finally, melting. The cycle repeats. It's the purest model of humanity's relationship with nature, not domination or struggle, but respectful cooperation within the climate's rules. We come, make something beautiful, then step aside to let it fade as it should. That annual thaw carries emotional gravity. When the ice melts, the water flows back into the same river it came from. Returning visitors sometimes stand on its banks, feeling a quiet tenderness. The walls that sheltered them now sparkle as the current. It's not decay. It's memory in motion. To a mind raised on permanence, such graceful impermanence feels enviable. To vanish without loss, at that moment, the ice hotel stops being entertainment and becomes reflection. It offers an answer to the modern fear of endings. There is no eternity here, only return. No ownership, only participation. No control, only trust. Such an attitude feels closer to ancient tribes than to modern life. The Inuit who built igloos each winter knew they'd melt come spring, and built them again anyway. To live, then, is to face the cold anew each year, not with fear, but with faith that sleep and morning will return as they always have. Another curious observation. In ice rooms, people rarely argue. Perhaps because the space encourages quiet, or because cold air transmits sound differently, softening voices. Scientists note that colder air lowers sound frequency. Conversation becomes gentler. Even breathing slows by 20%. And in that physical change is a symbol. Cold equalizes. It smooths tension, ambition, even difference. Snow and ice shelters have always been places of equality. In an igloo, everyone sat at the same level. Lamplight fell evenly on all. Ice hotels preserve that archetype. No one sleeps higher or lower. Every guest has the same sleeping bag, the same hides beneath them. It's not deprivation. It's balance made tangible. A night at -5 has no luxury tier. It's a shared ritual. Keep your warmth, accept nature's help, sleep without struggle. That's what makes cold one of the most human elements of climate. But perhaps the truest gift an ice hotel gives is trust. Modern life leaves little room for it. We rely on sensors, thermostats, rules, backups. Here, you can't calculate every degree. Ice is alive. It breathes, creaks, shifts. You can prepare, yet sooner or later you must surrender. To the structure, to your own instincts. That moment of surrender is victory. You stop being a guest and become part of what surrounds you. Psychologists studying ice hotel visitors noticed a consistent pattern. Afterward, their anxiety drops while focus increases. The explanation is physical. When perception is stripped to the essentials, the brain abandons noise. It begins to register the world by essentials, not signals. They call it sensory reboot sleep, though the Sámi and Inuit knew it all along. Nature cleans not just the body, but the mind. And finally, the ice hotel restores something else we've forgotten: respect for vulnerability. We're taught to see cold as an enemy because it exposes fragility. Yet when you lie safely among ice and still feel warm, that fragility turns into simplicity. You stop resisting the elements and exist within them. It's the oldest form of humility our culture has tried to forget. That's why a night in ice feels almost spiritual, gentle, wordless, unforgettable to the body. After such a night, the first breath of morning air feels different. The air seems warmer, not because the world has changed, but because the anxiety has dissolved. You know now that cold isn't danger. it's balance. Deep inside, a warmth remains. Everything that freezes will melt, and everything that melts will freeze again. The world, like the dome of the ice hotel, is round. We are only a breath that briefly warms its surface, and perhaps that is the purest way to exist. Not to own, not to defend, but simply to be. The next 13th block will serve as the pre-final one. It will explore what this northern experience means for modern people, how sleeping within ice becomes a lesson in living more simply, attentively, and trustingly with the elements that sustain the earth. Modern humans rarely meet nature in its pure form. Even when we go outdoors, it's usually with tents, thermoses, music, fire pits, and navigation apps. We spend our lives shielding ourselves from the elements through technology, insulation, climate control. But a night in ice is one of those rare moments when the world ceases to be a threat. It reminds us that we aren't foreign to the cold. We belong to it. And that realization may be far more important than it seems from the outside. For people from big cities, an ice hotel becomes a natural decelerator, a chamber that restores rhythm. Here, nothing moves quickly, and haste simply doesn't work. Even breathing slows down on its own. The air is dry, crisp, and your body instinctively adjusts to an economical pace. A slow inhale, an easy exhale. Within minutes, the brain calms, the thyroid eases, the heart steadies. What once looked like extreme tourism turns out to be therapy for overstimulation. In medicine, controlled cold has long been known as therapeutic hypothermia. It reduces inflammation, improves sleep, and eases anxiety. In an ice hotel, that principle takes the shape of art. Perhaps that's why so many visitors describe the experience as a reset in how I relate to nature. Not in the abstract, but in a deeply practical sense. The return of respect for simplicity. When you sleep on hides and realize the walls around you are frozen water, the excess of daily life disappears. All that remains is the warmth of your body, your breath, your awareness of safety. And suddenly, that simplicity becomes the key to inner calm. Psychologists call this the release effect. When the environment is stripped to its essentials, attention finally turns inward. These changes aren't philosophical, they're tangible. After a night in ice, many people find they can feel their bodies again, where they're tense or relaxed, cool or warm. That subtle sensitivity restores a dialogue with the physical self. We remember that skin, muscles, breath are not background processes, but living signals that tell us how we're doing. The sound of one's own heartbeat in the frozen silence feels almost like revelation. Even without any external noise, life inside rings loud and clear. There's also symbolism. For northern peoples, enduring cold was a rite of maturity, a test of composure more than strength. Unlike the southern trials of heat, the northern ones taught gentleness, not to conquer, but to align. The Sámi spoke of a calm body, a person who could walk all day through snow without losing warmth or resolve. Sleeping at -5 is a modern version of that same exam, remaining calm where others would shiver. In ice hotels, this calm becomes an emblem of trust. No one defeats cold here. You accept it and rely on technology, furs, and clothing to help. It's a new form of humility, not about rejecting comfort, but respecting the physics of the world. That ancient survival instinct transforms into modern emotional resilience, learning once again to live with instead of against. There's even a physical echo of that lesson. Exposure to moderate cold activates brown fat, a natural energy source that turns stored fuel into heat. It's a process every newborn knows instinctively, but adults forget after years of artificial warmth. When your body wakes that mechanism again, it literally remembers youth. It begins to trust itself instead of external heat. It's both biology and metaphor. The inner fire never vanished. It just needed to be reminded. Sleeping in ice teaches restoration through simplicity. You understand that warmth isn't something created outside you. It's already there. That silence doesn't cause peace. It reveals it. That winter need not destroy. It can heal. Ice hotels, in that sense, are unmarked therapy centers. They promise nothing, cure nothing, teach nothing, yet people leave changed. They step out sensing their boundaries, needs, breath, things the noise of modernity had buried. This sensation of returning to default is what gives the ice experience such value. We often hunt for peace without realizing it depends on trust, not absence of sound. Northern traditions have always known this. If you stop fighting the wind, it guides you. If you stop fearing snow, it keeps you warm. It's never about the weather. It's about the way you breathe. Ice hotels simply let modern people relearn that truth safely and beautifully, like a lesson from nature translated into the language of travel. That's why, when guests leave, many pause at the entrance, gazing at the transparent walls. Some take photos, others just stand in silence. They seem to grasp that something deeper happened than just a night's sleep, a small reconciliation between humans and climate. The ice hasn't warmed, but the fear has melted, and that means the lesson has taken root. The 14th and final block will conclude this story, connecting ancient wisdom and modern life, showing how the northern experience of sleeping in ice becomes a metaphor for a world learning, once again, to be alive, adaptive, and in balance. When the icy room sinks into the quiet of a polar night, you suddenly feel that the cold isn't an obstacle. It's the breath of the earth itself. The mind stops rushing, the body stops defending, and thoughts turn as clear as the ice around you. In that moment comes a realization. The vast North lives by laws that need neither challenge nor triumph, only acceptance, with gratitude. It's not submission to weakness, but recognition of balance, because if even ice can hold warmth, then the world must be justly made. Sleeping in ice is an ancient experience reborn through modern eyes. It's not a game for tourists, but a brief reminder of where things began. When the first people ventured into northern lands, they had only their breath to warm themselves and snow to build shelter. That same simple wisdom still holds true. To survive, one must trust the elements, listen to the body, respect cycles. Today, we return to that understanding not for survival, but for peace of mind. Every snow shelter, every ice hotel is like a letter from nature that says, "You have always been part of me." A night at -5 teaches the world anew. Warmth stops being luxury and becomes awareness. Cold stops being threat and becomes a form of silence. Even breathing gains meaning. Each visible cloud you exhale reminds you that life itself appears in the air before you. You realize the truest heating system is calm within, and the strongest wall is confidence that you belong beside nature, not apart from it. Schools don't teach that lesson, but one night in ice delivers it wordlessly. In spring, the hotels melt, arches collapse, the softened ice slips away, and the water returns to the rivers, Torne, Kemijoki, Alta. What once were walls become current. Some see disappearance, northerners see return. Nature, after all, doesn't end, it transforms. Months later, builders will return, harvest new ice, cast snow into walls, carve rooms, and the story will begin again. That cycle is a sign of harmony the world has mostly lost, but Scandinavia still keeps alive. We live in an age devoted to permanence: concrete, steel, data, glass, the illusion of forever. Yet true sustainability may be the ability to change with the weather. Ice architecture reminds us that nothing must last forever to be meaningful. Like the snow shelters of the Sámi, these creations exist only as long as needed, for one night, one experience, one piece. And that's enough for a person to feel purpose. This simple northern philosophy is quietly spreading. Architects speak of soft sustainability, psychologists of cold mindfulness, travelers of nighttime reboot. Beneath the terms lies one truth: humanity is again seeking balance with the planet, not through control, but through trust. Sleeping at -5 means acknowledging that the world wasn't built for our comfort, yet it can still be kind if treated gently. That realization may be the warmest gift the cold can give. Perhaps that's why so many return after their first stay, not for photos, not for courage, but because there, in the ice, they felt something rare, themselves, unguarded yet safe. They discovered that even in frozen silence there remains something alive: the heartbeat, the quiet pulse of blood, the steady breath of being. That feeling endures. It melts with the hotel, but reawakens with each new snowfall. And then comes morning. You step outside, the sun still low, the air ringing clear. Snow crunches beneath your boots, cheeks glow pink as the body's memory stirs. Everything around is simple. The same river, the same pines, the same light. But something essential has shifted. You no longer search for warmth outside. It's with you. You know now that a night at -5 can be peaceful if you trust yourself and the world. And that knowing will keep you warm for months, until winter returns and the ice calls you home again, to where the cold breathes softly and silence itself turns to warmth.